How do you plan to continue getting accurate news and information and even keeping the body of Christ together?
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
When I started this radio show and podcast back at the end of August, I wondered what the future was going to be like over the days, months, weeks, maybe even years ahead. Hard to say. I just felt this very strong leading, and it started back in the month of April, if I remember correctly. I was working in emergency management, and suddenly the alarm bell went off inside saying, you're dealing with something that's going to be used, and it's going to be used in such a way to be detrimental to basically people's freedom. I couldn't put my finger on it at the time. Now, let's go back in time together to the beginning of the worldwide pandemic. It was a year ago. I'm thinking literally a year ago now that I had first heard about the seriousness that this might, we weren't sure, but this could be. And I had a former employer of mine, good friend, asked me if I would consider coming out of retirement and helping in a large county and city's response to this pandemic. Once again, I'd been trained in emergency management, did that for a while in my career, and kind of before I retired. It was a unique experience, and I always wondered why God ever opened that door to do that kind of work. I mean, it really wasn't what I had done all my life. I've been a radio announcer. I'd been a broadcast engineer. And then while working for years with a Christian college, I took the time and did the work and ended up in ministry, which is where I thought I'd spend the rest of my life, just being a church pastor. I thought I'd finally get away from the radio business. But that didn't happen either. But why emergency management? Because if I really hadn't done that work, and I'm looking back now, we talk a lot on this program about those little decisions you make that make a huge impact down the road. It changes your trajectory entirely. I mean, look, when I first went to a little town in 1975 called Toccoa, Georgia, to apply for a job, and, I didn't know anybody there, never been there in my life, didn't even know the city existed. I knew some of the towns across the line in South Carolina, but I'd never really spent any time in Georgia. And I made that little trip because somebody said, hey, I think there's a job opening. Let me call to see if it's still open. Had that person not made that phone call and found out there was and gave me directions how to drive the 40 minutes south to get to Toccoa, Georgia, I never would have gone there. I mean, what reason would have I ever had to go visit little Toccoa, Georgia? This is long before the internet and job postings and things I would have found in the normal realm. But I made that trip, had my first interview, was told to head out to lunch, and they said how I could find all the fast food places on the main highway. And they said, and if you want to try something a little local, you can always go downtown. There are a few restaurants. And I, because of the way I came out from there, I just made a turn and found the downtown area. Never seen it before. I was looking for a specific restaurant they mentioned, but I couldn't find it. And I saw the word luncheonette counter on a drugstore window. I was hungry, so I went in there. That's where I met the lady that I married not that many months later. That one little everything. Going to visit one guy, made the phone call, from the phone call to the interview to lunch. That set up my entire family for many years. Just that one phone call. And so when you look back over your life, there are a lot of experiences and things we go through. Sometimes we don't understand why, but oftentimes there is a purpose. And that's how I look at my time in emergency management. It's not something that I looked for. It kind of found me because of a few people that I knew. And it was just at a time in my life when I needed something to do for a little while. I didn't think I'd hold that job forever, but I stayed a little longer than I planned. And I got hired primarily to build a website and deal with media. And it grew into planning and learning and understanding the operations of emergency management and how we respond, what our role is, the things that local government is really supposed to be doing. And I enjoyed my time. And I learned a lot I never would have understood or believed without doing the work that I did. Understanding threat assessment in terms of weather, environment. When you have certain factories in a neighborhood, you don't realize how many dangerous chemicals some of those places have. We have to know how to deal with it in the event there's a fire or some catastrophe at those plants. How do we protect the people around? What kind of trains come through our community? That became very important not that many years ago, especially in South Carolina when there was a derailment and some cars leaked some very powerful toxic gases and killed people in a community from a simple train derailment. So we became more aware of the everyday threats that are around us. And then there are the threats that we really don't know about. They used to call it terrorist activity. Then for political correctness, the Obama administration called it man-made disasters. And I guess that's supposed to make them better. We always thought it was rather foolish, but it is what it is. So I get called out of my work and, my retirement, more or less. Understand, up until a year ago, I was basically semi-retired. And I'm helping with church work, in planning churches. That's my ministry side. Doing engineering part-time for WRMI, the shortwave facility in Okeechobee. And I had done some other, church work and other things. And we had our little house in Georgia that we were able to acquire for literally next to nothing. And so we were using these two places to do the work that needs to be done in my retirement. I use my retirement as an opportunity to do the things that I would love to have done, but you had to make a living and put food on the table. Now that we've saved up and we're ready for a retirement, more or less, I use this time now for a lot of unpaid work, including this radio show. It's an unpaid job, but it's one that I take seriously. It's a calling. There's a purpose in why I do this radio program 5 days a week with a weekend version that goes out to a few other radio stations as well. So I start getting information about a year ago. You'd seen the news stories, and of course I'm looking at it a little differently because of my background that I would never have had I not made that sudden change in career toward the end of my working years, my full-time years. And then I get that phone call. And they my friend is starting to tell me things. He said, let me explain what really is going on. It's not in the news, so don't run around and tell everybody this, but there are statistics saying this could happen, that could happen. We don't know. This is all new. There's so much information we do not have, especially from the WHO and China, and everybody's scrambling trying to get ahead of this thing. But we need to plan for, and he gave me this worst case scenario of how many people were going to get sick in his county and how many they expected to die. The number was astronomical. Just plain, you got to be kidding. Over the top astronomical. And I debated it, and I said, yeah, I'll come up and help the best that I can. And so I left with all the good intentions that anybody that had ever done, coming after somebody's house had been hit by a tornado or a flood, we're dealing with a disaster or a potential disaster. Our job now is to help mitigate and prepare for the worst. So I took the job. And so I get there end of February. I remember the week or so before, and I've shared the message. I'm not going to do it on this program today. The fear not sermon that I preached right before I left. The Lord just laid on my heart to say, fear not. Fear not. And I tossed away a sermon I was going to preach, and I preached that instead. And then I got to the job site about 10 days later, and then we're beginning to prepare for this unbelievable onslaught of sickness and people dying. And I'm spending my time trying to put together media releases for radio and the news and all that stuff that you do, and working with other public information officers in that county to make sure that we're not panicking people, but then again, not letting them know what's going on. The last thing you need to do is cause uncontrolled panic. It makes everything even worse, because then people begin to empty out grocery stores, go into panic mode, and then you create more troubles than you'd have if you just step by step systematically prepare people for the next step. And so, with all good intentions, that's what I did for, the month of March. And then we start getting, even before you ever heard the term, 15 days to flatten the curve, before you ever heard that term, for about 10 days, we're already discussing it. It's already coming out from various think tanks and the CDC and others saying, we need to do this and we need to lock down. We need to get people to social distance. We need to do all these things. Wash your hands. Take the Lysol to all your countertops. I mean, we didn't know. We're just jumping into everything to stop this thing. And so, with all good intent, we started explaining and putting together county ordinances. Cities were doing the same thing. States were making suggestions or requirements depending on what state you lived in. And we came up with this whole package of how we're going to spend the next 15 days to keep the hospitals from being overwhelmed. Now, forget everything you think you know now or thought you knew then. All of us in our line of work at the local end, where the rubber meets the road, we did all this with all the best of intentions. We were told this is what to expect. I was told to expect thousands of people to die from the coronavirus before the end of May or early June, no later than the end of June. 3,000 in our county. Now, it ended up being 51 or 52 people by that time, not 3,000. And the hospitals were not overwhelmed. All the money we spent to prepare for all this was never needed. I began to understand that Easter of last year, that weekend. I remember going, there's something that's not, we've been told all this, and I'm waiting and waiting and waiting, and the numbers are just not adding up. And we hear about all these cases and testing, and I'm beginning to wonder to myself. I'm staying in a hotel, no maid service because, we can't infect anybody. They would just drop off new sheets and stuff, and they gave us a bag to put our old stuff in, and they pick it up the next day. So I'm living in a hotel. All my food is being delivered, or I'm walking down the street to go to the drive-up windows, or whatever the case was. I can't remember it all. And everything was being takeout only. And I'm thinking to myself, what are we accomplishing here? What is the story on this thing? One of the things about this radio program, and I'm going to jump ahead just a second here. Whenever I share something with you on this radio program, I have done my level best to make sure that what I'm telling you is accurate. I get a lot of material from a lot of good friends, people that I know, even many of you listeners sending things in. A lot of it is interesting, but I really have to dig deep to make sure that I'm not giving anything that may not be completely correct. It's my responsibility in doing a show like this. I'll tell you what, things like Facebook drive me nuts. I've got friends all over the country, And they'll see something that somebody shares and they'll go, oh, I believe it. And they have to share it. And then I have to explain to them, no, it is not true. Somebody made it up. You're being made a fool. Why are you posting this stuff? Can't you at least double check anything you put up if you don't know firsthand? A lot of people, they want to believe something, so they see it, they want to believe it, and they immediately share it like it's gospel truth, and it isn't. There was a lot of stuff coming out even in the early days of the virus that was simply not true, or unvetted, or uncertain. And I saw a lot of material. I still get a lot of stuff that people send to me about, and I'm not going to get into it today, maybe next week, but I have to be careful in everything that I share. A lot of people they hear about certain things and they tie it all together in one happy package, and some of the pieces in your package are not correct. I can tell you that from my own personal experience in the things that I do. Yet a lot of stuff gets out there. It's in the Facebook pages. It's on MeWe and all the other, and Gab Media and all that. I worry about those places too. While I'm all for free speech, I just think that if you're going to enjoy free speech, don't abuse it, misuse it, and put out garbage, nonsense, and things that are not true. Be careful in what you share. You don't want to give those that want to put you into bondage any more ammunition to come after you. See, if you're out there consistently putting out false information, then I can understand where somebody may want to moderate and say, you can't say that. It's not true, or it's slanderous, or it's libelous, or, it's going to cause people to do things because you're spreading a lie. I get it. I thoroughly understand that. Many people who are conservative, and sadly, many who are Christians, they don't vet the stuff they get, and then they end up bringing reproach onto the name of Christ without realizing that maybe that was the design of the person that originally put out the false information to begin with. Now, let me back up and say that again in case you missed it. Sometimes I think a lot of this weird and false information that so-and-so did this or that happened or this person has been arrested and they're not, and all this, or so-and-so was found dead and they're alive and well. A lot of these things get out there. They're over the top, baloney and phony. Yet because so many people want to believe it's true, they immediately share it as it is true. And then it gets out there. One person sees it, then two. Then they share it, then it's four. Then 4 becomes 8. 8 becomes 16, 32, 64. In no time, this one little piece of false information is multiplied, and now tens or hundreds of thousands of people think it's true. We as Christians in particular, this radio program in particular, I will never share anything with you that I do not believe to be true, or I have any kind of serious doubt. Sometimes it's hard. I'll tell you, sometimes it is very hard to get specific information. Let's just say that and know that up front. And I'm also very cautious. I may wait a day or two or three before I share something that I think might be true until I can get enough corroborating information to, well, at least not deny it. Sometimes people don't want all the truth to be out there. You know that. I know that. I was thinking, and this is not bragging. Believe me, I am not bragging in what I'm about to tell you here. I was thinking just the other day of some of the stories and some of the things that I've shared with you since last March, in particular, when I first got into emergency management. And by the time the end of March came, I started a series of programs in March, April, and May, back when it was just your weekend show called The Politics of a Pandemic. And I was trying to warn you that regardless of the accuracy of the information, whether this be a deadly virus more so than they say it is or isn't, or whatever the numbers really come out to be, beware of the politics that can be used in this. It all goes back to something Rahm Emanuel said back during the years that he worked for the Clinton administration. Never let a good crisis go to waste. And I started seeing governors and mayors taking full advantage of this crisis to begin to get retribution against Christians and churches and conservatives. They used it. They did, and they abused it. The numbers, to me, have always been one of those issues. And when I say numbers, I'm talking numbers of infections, number of actual deaths. That has always been troubling to me. If I wish I had the time to go back in the library, because I know it was somewhere in either late October, I think it was late October, a news story came out, and I think I made a brief comment on it. And it was right before the election, and you had Joe Biden running for president, and he made a statement. And, of course, CNN and MSNBC and all the morally, intellectually, journalistically, and spiritually bankrupt media just jump all over it. He said, because of the mismanagement or whatever, it's politics, but that by the end of, I think he was starting to say it right before the election, then he reiterated it again in November, that by the end of February, there'll be 500,000 people will die of COVID-19. Now, this is what he said. 500,000 people will die of COVID-19 by the end of February. We weren't anywhere near that. We'd have to really ramp up the number of deaths in order to hit that. We were also seeing this exponential rise in cases that started, around October. You could say that, it's that time of the year. Man, to a degree, yeah. But some things to me, once again, I go back to the math simply doesn't add up. Now listen carefully what I'm saying. So here's a prediction that the media runs with by their darling, Joe Biden, that 500,000 people are going to die by the end of February. So we'll get the final numbers, I'm sure, in the first week or so of March. And I said back then, Joe Biden will get his 500,000 people dead from the coronavirus, even if they didn't die of the virus. And I'm going to get into that in a moment. You notice that suddenly the number of cases is beginning to go down. I mean, the number of cases is going down. Most of your media sources will not tell you why. They just say, well, Biden's in office and the case numbers are going down. Whatever they're doing, we must be doing better than we did before. That's pretty much the mantra you're going to get from the intellectually, moralistically, journalistically, and spiritually bankrupt mainstream media in America, which is backed up by the fascist Facebook. I mean, they are fascist. They are government entities. They are among the wealthy billionaire elites, including Jack Dorsey of Twitter. I don't twit away my life on that trashy outlet anymore. I've disconnected this radio show from Twitter, and I'm going to be disconnecting it from Facebook in the days and weeks ahead. I'll tell you more about that in just a little while. My plans moving forward when it comes to this. I didn't want to do anything knee-jerk. I wanted to take my time, think it through like I am on some other things. When you make a knee-jerk reaction, sometimes you make a mistake. So I'm taking my time to weigh the options and prayerfully consider what steps should I take on certain things regarding this show on shortwave. And I'll talk about that shortly. And also as a podcast, I'll talk about that as well before the program is over. There's some really exciting things. When I say exciting, I mean really exciting things on the horizon. A lot has happened this week. I'll tell you about that as well today. But I want to finish up this thought about why I'm so cautious about the things that I say. You may send me something in the mail, and I get letters every other day with great information. Some of it is very accurate. Some I can't vet. I can't prove it. And if I can't prove it, I'm not going to share it because the last thing I can afford to ever have happen to this program is this. If I ever get caught sharing fake information, then the enemies of this program, the enemies of the cross, the enemies of truth, the enemies of the nuclear family and your church and everything else, the enemies of all of it will take advantage of it, and they will now have the ammunition to shut me down. That's why I can't share everything you send, because I can't prove it. I wish I could. I do my best. I have people that will do some research and double check. A lot of stuff you send me, I find out it's nonsense, and I don't know where you got it and why you're sharing it. Got to be careful, because I really believe in, for lack of a better term, a reverse psyop. In other words, the enemy of us, the conservatives, the Christians, are to find over-the-top, idiotic news stories, put them out there on Facebook, and watch how fast the lemmings just throw it out there like it's truth. And then that gives the Jack Dorseys and the Mark Zuckerbergs all the authority to say, you are a bunch of fools. We're calling it fake news and shutting you down. We're kicking you off YouTube because you just shared something fake and phony and fraudulent. And the thing is, you thought you were sharing something you believe was true because you saw it from somebody you think you know. I'm telling you, a lot of this stuff that's out there that is pure garbage is put out there for you to pick up and share like it's your own. You're becoming used by those that want to shut you down, and you're doing their work and don't even realize it. That's the danger we face with a lot of our social media today. And I was seeing this back when I'm working in emergency management. I'm trying to kind of follow the social media trends. It's part of what I did. I'm going, where are they coming up with this nonsense? A lot of it turned out not to be true. And when you get caught doing it, how do you defend yourself? When you put out something that is libelous or fraudulent, how do you defend yourself? Well, I thought it was because I saw my good friend Johnny over there put it on his page, so I shared it. Well, where did Johnny get it? Well, Johnny got it from Billy, who got it from Susan, who got it from somebody that said he knew a cousin, who knew somebody in the CIA who's retired. You know, it gets into the ridiculous. That's why you've got to be so careful, or you're going to be made a fool. I looked over the track record. I was sharing a little bit of an email exchange the other night with Dr. Gales, who's been on the program yesterday and a couple of days this week. And I, even Dr. Gales, I love him to death. I've always say, remember, I'm going to be your skeptic on this program. It's my job to double and triple and quadruple check so we don't fall into that trap of some of the misinformation that gets out there. And there's some programs I'll do in the future. There's some theories out there that a lot of you are subscribing to that I can tell you, wow, you're about to be made a fool. Be very careful. It's like I always worried about QAnon and all that stuff. All these great promises and all the days would come and go and nothing was happening. And I'm thinking, man, I think QAnon is part of a reverse psyop. In other words, getting everybody to become fools by passing along this stuff. Honestly, I don't think Bill Barr did us right. I think that he's part of the swamp too, sadly. And then a lot of people saying, yeah, he got his money out of Dominion voting. No, he didn't. He got his money out of Dominion Energy. No relationship. But people immediately shared the Dominion. Oh, yeah, it has to be. That's where you got to be careful not to allow yourself to be a pawn in a deadly international game. And that's what we're up against. That's what I want to talk about shortly. How we're going to stay connected, how we're going to keep information flowing, and how we're going to keep our information pure. We're coming into a time. I can't emphasize this enough. We're coming into a time of extreme, I'm not going to be bold enough to try to pretend I'm a prophet of God and say this is the Great Tribulation. I'm not going to do that. I'll let the fools do that who keep falling on their face. I got one guy, real quick. I got one guy, I'm still on the email list. He fraudulently made a bunch of claims back in August, September, October about the election and how it's going to turn and how it's going to turn around again. And over, the dates come and go, and he missed it. And now they're going to try to do some kind of Pray for America campaign and send us more money. I'm sorry. There are two groups I'm not sending any money to right now. The Republican Party, number one, because they failed, and especially when I look at the 6 senator idiots that are they're swamp rhinos, for crying out loud. You cannot have an impeachment of an American citizen. It doesn't exist. So we have syphilis-brained senators that think they can impeach a private citizen and completely trash the Constitution. There's no Chief Justice presiding. They're bringing in evidence that no court, not even the smallest little county court in America, would ever allow in. It's a fascist farce run by fools. A fascist farce of fools. We have to find a way to have truth. We need to be prepared because all of this is going to be used very, very soon. And it's funny, as we come to these really difficult times, God is opening up many doors. One last thought before the break. I've been talking to a lot of friends, some I haven't talked to in a long time. And they'll say, Bob, and some of these people don't even get a chance to ever listen to this radio show. Just because of where they're at, they're not shortwave listeners, they don't do the podcast kind of stuff. I understand not everybody's going to carve out an hour a day to listen to this radio program. I get it. But some people, many of you do. I want to thank you for that. So, had this guy I hadn't talked to in a while. And I know him well. And I don't talk much about the radio program. He just happens to know that I do one. And he keeps saying he promises I'm going to listen one day. But I understand all that he does. He said, I'm feeling this voice inside saying that I need to start preparing for some difficult times, and I don't understand what I'm preparing for. One guy said, I think I want to move to a different place to be among fellow believers and away from a big city. I mean, I'm getting all of this feedback, and this is from people that don't even fully know what I'm doing on this radio show. I'm going to talk about the proactive stuff. You need to know stuff right after we take this break.
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
The salvation sign coming up. Shalom Aleichem. This is the nice Jewish boy, Jonathan Kahn, your Jewish connection, bringing you the riches of your Jewish roots in Jesus. Now get your pen out as fast as you can so you don't miss out on receiving a special free gift you're going to get and love in a moment. Now, Messiah was invited into the house of a sinner, a corrupt tax collector named Zacchaeus. People were amazed that the Lord would associate with somebody of that nature. And yet during his visit, Messiah said, "Today salvation has come to this house." Now, why did he say it? Was it because Zacchaeus broke out into singing Onward Christian Soldiers, or because he could say the Apostles' Creed and recite Calvin's Institutes by heart? Was it because Zacchaeus went to the other room and changed and came back with a radically saved t-shirt on? Or was it because Zacchaeus was holding in his hand the latest Amy Grant cassette? No, it was none of these things. It was because Zacchaeus had made a statement, which was this: "Behold, Lord, here and now I'll give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I've cheated anyone out of anything, I'll pay back 4 times as much." What was the salvation sign? It was putting the gospel into action. It was real, costly, sacrificial. I really mean it, Lord. Putting my money and treasure where my mouth is, repentance and action. And he did it joyfully and freely. That was the salvation sign. See, words alone don't cut it. The Lord's waiting for you to be like Zacchaeus and really apply the gospel fully in your life, with nothing held back. He's waiting for you to take the initiative and do that really good thing, even that costly and sacrificial thing that you know you need to do, to make that needed change in your life that the Spirit's been tugging on your heart to do. Do it, and do it joyfully, and you'll be blessed. And the Lord will say with joy, "Today salvation has really come to this life." Want more? Ask for the Zacchaeus principle. Now the free gift for you. What if you discovered the place where the lost Ark of the Covenant was? Well, a newly revealed ancient discovery just as awesome. The Mystery of the Temple Doors. You'll love it. It's our free gift to you. And Sapphire's daily spiritual vitamins guaranteed to revitalize your walk, or a free New Testament. How do you get all these free gifts? Easy. Just remember Jesus' Hebrew name, Yeshua, and dial it. That's all you do. Just dial 1-800-YESHUA-1. You'll be so blessed, but call now. 1-800-YESHUA-1. Now, the Jewish people brought you the blessings of salvation. I invite you to join with me to bring it back to them, to bless those who blessed you and reach the unreached peoples from every nation. Just call now. 1-800-YESHUA-1. That's YESHUA-1. Or write me direct, The Nice Jewish Boy, at Box 1111, Lodi, New Jersey, 07644. It's a Nice Jewish Boy, Box 1111, Lodi, Lodi, New Jersey, 07644. Till next time, this is Jonathan Kahn saying Shalom Alechem. Peace be to you, my friend in Messiah. Tikvatenu, our hope.
This is Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman.
I want to welcome you back to the Friday and weekend edition of Truth to Ponder. I'm your host, Bob Bierman. I want to just take just a moment before I get into some very important information I think you're going to find exciting and also informative. I want to thank all of those. There are people all over that are supporting this ministry so I can afford to buy the shortwave airtime. And even a few people are actually making small but very helpful contributions via Anchor, the podcast site, where you can say that I'll give $4.99 a month. You know, right now, podcasting is relatively inexpensive, but I'm going to be making some changes there. I'll talk about that in just a moment. I'm really coming to a meeting of the mind, so to speak, on how to deal with podcasting and moving forward, and being prepared for being deplatformed at times, too. So these are things that have got to be considered. Shortwave airtime, currently we're on WRMI. We're on at 5 and 6 p.m. Eastern time on the frequencies of 5950 at 5 and 9395 at 6. Now, this time of the year can get iffy between the frequencies, I know. And I'm trying to find a more consistent time. It's just not easy to do at WRMI, even with all their transmitters and coverage and everything. And I do engineering for them, too. I pay for the airtime at RMI, just so you know. I buy my own airtime. And when I work there, they get to pay me some of the money back. But that's just kind of, it's strange. But I do it because I love the business. And there's not many people that do this anymore. I'm going to get to that in just a moment. Your support of this program, like I say, we're also on KVOH out of Los Angeles, 9975. And I really need to know, this is where I've made an investment out of my own pocket for 2 months in a row. And honestly, I'm not getting any feedback. And so maybe you are listening. I just need to know. Am I wasting my time or effort to put it there? Hate to be so blunt, but I need to hear. We're now, 6 weeks in, 7 weeks on KVOH, and I really need to know if you're there, because it's not inexpensive, and I'm going to have to dig into savings one more time if I decide to go one more month. And so I just need to know. And if you're listening on WRMI, let me know. Some people have suggested some other radio stations like WINB, and I think they're up in Pennsylvania. I'm not sure if their coverage would be helpful. They do have some time available. The price is not too bad, and I got to consider that. Others have talked about WBCQ out of Maine. I don't know. There's the old WRNO, and trying to get people to contact me back. But there's also some other opportunities, and I'll mention that in just a moment. Now, if you want to help this, you can go to the website. You know, we haven't been deplatformed there for support. And I try to keep it low enough profile where I'm not making a whole lot of noise at the moment. And you can help there any way you can. I don't pay myself, just so you understand. I do not pay myself to do this program. And I don't pay anybody else. I make nothing. But what monies come in goes strictly to cover the cost of airtime and maybe a little bit of one of the podcasting fees that may change soon. So, and that's not much. That's really only been about $10 or $15 a month, maybe a little bit more. It's not much. I can more than handle it. But I need to decide how to be a good steward of what God has given me through you, his people. And I want to make sure that I'm getting the kind of coverage that we truly need to have. And if you can help, our mailing address is 21 Berkshire, Berkshire, 21 Berkshire Lane, number 263. That's kind of important up here. Even though that is a physical mailing address for us, the number 263, if it's regular U.S. mail, they like to put it into a little box, in the middle of the complex. So they really asked to add that 263. It makes her life a lot easier. And we are in a city called Sky Valley. 2 words, Sky Valley. The state is Georgia. The zip code is 30537. Once again, 21 Berkshire, Berkshire Lane, number 263, Sky Valley, Georgia, 30537. Hard to believe that we're going to have the 28th of the month, the end of the month is going to come up in, about 2 weeks? Something like that, 2.5 weeks. So we just kind of need to know what we're doing and where to invest. When I started the program today, I talked about staying connected, getting news out there, keeping informed. Podcasting is not a bad thing, and I know a lot of you. I don't really get into all the numbers, but because some of these get pushed out through third parties as well, so it goes beyond what even I know. But I know that a lot of you are listening as a podcast, and I'm surprised. You would think that I would have most of my audience in the United States. Well, I do, but barely. Canada, Australia, and other nations, the podcast is growing because, once again, all of us, regardless of our nations, in the Western world, we're facing the same things. The same draconian lockdowns, the same virus, the same kind of oppressive governments. I mentioned, I think it was on yesterday's program, I saw that article out of France where some of these politicians were just angry. How dare a Christian not sign a piece of paper saying that the law of France is greater than the law of God? I mean, literally, that's what they couldn't understand, why this Christian group cannot sign a document saying the laws of France are greater than the laws of God. Now, you can say, well, that's just France. Well, that'll become Germany, become England, become Canada, and become the United States just as quick as same-sex marriage did. It's on the way. It already is on the way in some states. It already's there. It already is in parts of Canada, what you can and cannot preach on from God's Word. Well, that's considered hate speech, and it's coming everywhere. It's all part of a satanic master plan. Now, I'm saying that not to be bold, not to give you some great sounding headline, or I'm not trying to be sensationalistic or over the top. It is what it is. The Bible warned about it centuries ago. Over time, since the time of Christ, there have been periods of extreme tribulation in this world. It's going to get bad. Will it be the Great Tribulation? I don't have the peace of God to say yay or nay. Some people are bold enough to say it, but a lot of them have said it before and have been wrong. So I'm a little bit cautious. Some of the same people that said it was going to happen in 1988 are saying it's happening now. So I'm not going to go there. But I am going to do what the Bible says, to be ready, to be a watchman, to be prepared. It's not just one tribulation. It's periods of persecution and tribulation that have occurred over and over and over again. You will be hated for my name's sake, is what Jesus says to his disciples. He never said, oh, you're going to have a wonderful, easy time. You'll be building churches and everybody's going to love you and respect you. And then maybe somewhere in 2,000 years, there'll be a tribulation and everybody's going to have, literally hell on earth. Doesn't say that in the scripture. It said from day one, you'll be hated for my name's sake, that we are in this world and not of this world. It goes on and on and on. We were never promised peace, tranquility, and prosperity in this life. There's no such promise. And anybody that tries to give you one, like the Joel Osteens, feel good about yourself. You can find the good inside of you. He's a phony, he's a fraud, he's a heretic. Stop listening to heretics, please. They are the real deceivers leading the sheep astray. There are a lot of good programs. There's some questionable ones, too, you find on shortwave. I kind of know that I'm in this, strange arena with a lot of people I don't always agree with. A lot of them I never agree with. Some that used to be on shortwave I would never agree with then or now. I try to bring integrity to the band. I try to be honest. You may disagree with my theology. Fine. That's your right to disagree. I'm not going to tell you. I've got good friends that are non-Christians. They kind of like the program or they tolerate it. They say, at least you're not this guy, that guy, or the other. And some of the stuff you say actually does make sense. Yeah, I try to. We're coming into a time where conventional internet stuff is going to be harder and harder to do. We're going to have to come into our own little quiet nodes of conversation. A friend of mine said to me on the phone, I think it was the night before last, Bob, what we really need is we need to have little groups where there's only just a couple hundred of us and we kind of know each other so we can sort out the nonsense and the garbage and the fake information and not be deceived. And when we hit our 100 or 200 or whatever it is number of people, we take no new memberships until somebody quits or we have to get rid of somebody. Then we have one opening. That kind of makes sense. I think he's right. Maybe that's how we need to look at it. The early church model, they built churches in communities. They met in people's houses or catacombs. They didn't have big buildings and light shows and smoke machines and rock bands. They had, for lack of a better term, I'm going to say it, like it or not, word sacrament, God's word, singing of psalms, spiritual songs. I have no problem with styles of music. If you've listened to this program, I like the ultra traditional. I like some of the new stuff too, as long as it's Christ-centered and God-honoring. I've been in this ministry I've been an actual ordained pastor for like 25 years, over 25 years. And so I've done more than my share of it. I get it. But getting back to what's important, there's opportunity out there. I'm still looking at two different things. I'm looking at a piece of property that could be used as not just a small home for us, but as another house on the property when people are coming through for training and what have you, like they did back in the day. There's property that a chapel could be built on. We may do it, we may not. It's something that we're just looking at, praying about. And that's there, or something like it. But there's also an opportunity right now to increase the shortwave footprint. Let me say that again carefully. I can't go into a whole lot of detail, but there may be a way to increase the shortwave footprint that reaches into North America. And the investment is not all that bad. And I probably will look into some savings we're allowed to get into now in our retirement that we couldn't before. And I'd rather invest in that than a lot of other things in this world. I'm looking at increasing that footprint. I'm looking at trying to find a frequency or two and extend the reach to places that may not be able to get a good voice in the not too distant future. I'm at this point of making a lot of decisions. I believe shortwave is important. I can't emphasize that enough. Right now, it's really easy. You know, if you go back 6 months ago, we had our cable, we have our satellite TV, and we had those certain networks we trusted. Now, some of those networks we trusted, we find we can't trust anymore. Sorry, but I can't. I see things that are just highly disturbing. I look at politics. People that claim to be people you could trust have proven themselves to be non-trustworthy. They lied. They misrepresented themselves. They took advantage of us. And I'm not happy about it. But then again, I don't put my trust and my hopes and my dreams on politicians or the sons of men. Bible says the princes or sons of men. No, it's in God only, in God alone. In God and God alone is where I put my trust. Little radio stations are going to need some help in programming. I think that some of these small little voices out there that are not in the big city, I think there's going to be a lot of ways of reaching people. I remember working for a guy that said he thought he heard of the Lord this word to do this, and then he probably did, but he decided not to follow through. I think that a lot of these little tiny FMs and maybe a little AM here and there are going to be more than just the local place for getting news. That might be the place where Christians in small towns where the big cities never hear, don't care, we get to still communicate. Shortwave fills in the gaps. And then we're going to find a bunch of, little sites to have a program like this. I may not have 1 million people follow me on a podcast. I may not be like, what's his name, Dan Bongino or Alan Dershowitz. They're doing podcasts now, and I'm sure they got their hundreds of thousands. And poor little Bob Bierman here is going to get his, 50 to 250. But then if we can raise up more like me to do the same thing, in time we can reach a lot of people. One platform I'm using, I just want to kind of put an announcement out there now that I may pull the plug on in the not too distant future. Currently, I'm using 2 different sites for the podcast. One of the sites I've got to pay money for each month for them to archive. The other one, it's like next to nothing. And the irony is the one that I'm paying for has 1/4 the results of the other one in terms of people listening and downloading. The one that I'm having the most grief with is Spreaker, SP, like speaker with an R and like Spreaker instead of speaker. I've been using that platform since the beginning of your weekend show. It's like 6 years ago. And lately, it's just, I can't believe how it's just only a handful of people that are on that platform, and the rest are elsewhere. So I may move everything to Anchor, then add another one. Even if I have to pay for one, I want one where I have more control, or I need to find server space. Maybe I can come up with a way to host 2 or 3 or 4 other various podcasts that we need to have, but even some short form stuff. Maybe there's a way we can do that. Those are things I'm praying about and looking at to keep us connected. Maybe you should be doing a podcast. Maybe you thought about it, but you don't even know where to start. Contact me. I'm not going to charge you anything to help you, to talk to you. My job right now is to facilitate all of us that are being called to do this work in a fast approaching difficult time. You can't tell me we can borrow trillions of dollars and not have an economic crisis on our hands in short order. You can't tell me that becoming energy dependent upon the world is going to keep our gas prices low and energy prices low. You can't tell me that raising the cost of fuel is going to keep our food prices reasonable. We're about to come into a time of inflation. We're about to come into a time of difficulty. We're about to come into a lot of grief if we're not careful, if we're unprepared. So I'm going to ask you the question. Are you ready for what's about to take place? Do you believe that we need more voices out there? Do you stand with what I'm trying to do here? Do you need to be a part of this? I can't do it all, and I can't do it all forever if Jesus tarries. So this is why I ask you as point blank as I can. I need to know where you're listening at, how, and do you stand with me in the kind of work that I'm trying to do? If you believe in what's going on here, if you believe in it, go to the website, which is truth2ponder.com, truth2ponder.com. Share the website with your friends, and I'm going to make some decisions real soon regarding which shortwave stations to be on, which ones not, which platforms. I've got to. I can't just keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. We all know that's insanity. But I know that I'm willing to give certain things time to produce. I'm not going to pull the plug too quick. I'm going to give it time. But when it's not there, then, prayerfully, the voice is saying, be prepared to move things around. Be prepared to move yourself around. Be prepared to provide more than just this service to other people. How do you feel about it? What are your thoughts? Will you let me know? I'm proud of the work that we've done. We told you last year that with the change in the CDC to look for the death numbers of coronavirus to go higher, even though they probably are not. We told you the PCR test was not trustworthy. Even the inventor had said as such. And now magically all the news agencies are saying, it's just funny that when Biden was inaugurated, they changed the standard for counting cases, and suddenly the case numbers are coming down. And of course, then next they'll get serious about counting real COVID deaths. Like, instead of, read a story, a guy that had tested positive for the coronavirus died at age 67. It turns out he had lung cancer, had had it for over 2 years, and only had about 2.5 years to live. And did he really die of this or not? There's been a lot of that going on. 20 some odd symptoms. It could be anything, and you can assume it a COVID death. So is it the death numbers? Will Biden get his 500,000? Yeah. Will they really all have been from this virus? No. You know it and I know it. Don't allow yourself to be deceived any longer. You have been deceived. And we try to talk about that. It's not that that's the only topic to talk about. I'm concerned about the vaccine. We'll probably talk about it a little bit next week. I'm concerned about big banks, wanting to know where you give your money. Oh, did you go to Washington, D.C.? We're going to rat on you. We're going to tell the federal government you rented a hotel room in D.C. or near it. We're checking your credit cards and statements, and we're going to tell you. We don't want you as a customer. I'm waiting for the day that, PayPal cuts me off and others. It's going to happen. Certain banks are going to do it. We got to be prepared. I need to be ready. I need to be ready to get this program out to more people even quicker. If you believe in the ministry, remember the address again. And you can make the check payable to Ancient Word Radio. It's 21 Berkshire, Berkshire, 21 Berkshire Lane, number 263. We are in Sky Valley, Georgia. Sky Valley, 2 words, Georgia, and the zip code 30537. For many of you, I'll see you on Monday.
This has been Truth to Ponder with Bob Bierman. To find out more, visit our website, truth2ponder.com. That's truth2ponder.com. Truth to Ponder. Shining the light of truth in a darkening world.